I never thought I'd be the kind of guy who'd find himself staring at the ceiling, feeling like his entire world was crumbling, but here I am. It started a couple of days ago when she told me she'd be working late. Sarah always said that when she knew she'd be out past dinner, like she was trying to give me a heads up, but I could tell she was dodging the truth. Her voice sounded too bright, too rehearsed. I didn't push that night, but something about her tone stuck with me. The house was quiet that evening. I was sitting on the couch, flipping through the channels out of habit when I noticed it. A faint scent of perfume I didn't recognize. It was sweet, floral but heavy, lingering in the air like a subtle betrayal. I frowned, leaning closer to the cushion where my hand rested, and I saw a lipstick smudge right on the armrest, a bold red smear that wasn't there the day before. It was strange, almost like a sign I didn't want to believe in, but I kept staring at it, knowing deep down that I was onto something. Then I remembered her phone. Sarah always kept it close, but lately she'd been more secretive about it, always hiding it away when I entered the room. That night I reached for it while she was in the shower, just a quick glance. I didn't think much of it, just a gut feeling. The screen was unlocked and there was a string of messages. It took me seconds to realize what I was reading. Flirty texts, inside jokes, promises of meeting up. The words stung more than I can describe, but what caught my eye even more was a timestamp. Last night. At the same time she claimed she was working late. I sat there, stomach twisting, trying to process what I was seeing. It felt like a punch to the gut. I moved toward the living room window, trying to breathe through the chaos. I didn't want to jump to conclusions, but everything in my gut was screaming that I was missing pieces of the puzzle, and the pieces were lying right there in plain sight. The evidence was clear enough, but what made it worse was the fact that I'd been blind to it. I'd trusted her completely, or so I thought. I'd always believed in the quiet simplicity of our life, the picnics in the park, the lazy mornings, the little routines. Now that trust was shattered. I could see her in my mind, fingers trembling as she worked late, her voice falsely cheery on the phone, hiding her real truth behind a wall of excuses. I felt my jaw tighten, palms clammy and cold. My chest ached with betrayal, and I wondered how I could have missed all the signs. There was no way I could keep quiet about this, but I didn't want to act impulsively. I needed a plan, something cold, calculated. I wanted her to feel what it was like to be betrayed, to be caught off guard. But more than that, I wanted her to understand that I wasn't going to be the fool she thought I was. I started to think about how I could turn this around, how to make her regret ever crossing that line. The next morning, I woke up with a heavy weight pressing on my chest. I stared at the ceiling, trying to think clearly. I decided I wasn't going to confront her right away. No, I needed to gather proof, see if there was more I didn't notice. I started checking her stuff, her phone, her drawers, her emails. I even followed her that day just to see who she was meeting, how she moved. Every step, every word confirmed what I'd already suspected. She was lying to my face. That evening I sat her down. She was upbeat, nervous even when I told her I knew everything. Her eyes flickered with guilt, but she tried to act innocent. "It's not what you think," she said, voice trembling. "It's just a mistake, I swear." I cut her off coldly. "Save it, I've seen the messages, the lipstick. You've been lying to me from the start. Who is he?" She hesitated. "It's just my childhood friend, Mark. We ran into each other at the store and it just happened. I didn't mean for it to go this far." That was the moment I realized I'd have to do something more than just feel betrayed. I needed to make her pay. But I wasn't just going to storm out and leave her to her shame. No, I was planning something that would make her regret ever crossing that line. I had to be smart, subtle, and ruthless, because once you cross me, there's no going back. Do you want me to continue? That night I stayed up late, replaying everything I'd found out. My mind raced with options, but one thing was clear. I couldn't just leave it at she cheated. That wouldn't be enough. She needed to understand that her betrayal had consequences, that I was capable of something more calculated than just storming out or shouting. The next morning I started executing my plan. First thing, I went through her phone again. I needed more evidence, and I knew she had to be hiding something else, maybe secret messages or details about her meetings. I found a few more texts between her and Mark, some that hinted at plans to meet again. Perfect. Now I had a trail, a paper trail of her lies, and a solid base for what was coming next. I also took photos of the lipstick smudge, the messages, and some of her belongings I'd secretly snooped through. I wanted to be meticulous, proof enough that I could show her later, but also to use as leverage. I knew what I was about to do would shake her up, maybe even destroy what little trust was left, but I didn't care anymore. If she wanted to play dirty, I'd meet her at her own game. A few hours later, I called her at work. Her voice sounded hesitant, like she sensed I was up to something. I kept my tone even, almost casual. "Hey, I need to talk to you about something when you get home." I paused, letting her squirm. "It's about last night and some things I found out." She hesitated, then said, "Okay, I'll be home soon. What is it?" When she arrived, I was waiting in the living room. I handed her my phone, showing her the photos I'd taken. Her face drained of color. It was obvious she knew I had her caught red-handed. I saw her try to speak, but I cut her off. "You lied to me," I said softly but firmly. "You told me you were working late, but I found texts, pictures, and even evidence of your next meetup. So don't bother denying it. I want to know exactly what you're doing with him." Her hands trembled. "It's not what it looks like." "Oh, it's exactly what it looks like," I snapped. "You've been cheating, lying, sneaking around our house. How long has this been going on?" She looked down, tears starting to form. "A few months. I didn't mean for it to happen, I swear." That's when I realized I had to act, not with anger or shouting, but with cold calculation. I told her I'd been planning something, that she'd push me into a corner. I carefully laid out my revenge plan, how I'd let her think she got away with it for a little while, only to make sure she paid for what she did. I told her I was going to make her regret crossing me, that she'd be sorry she ever betrayed our life together. I handed her a small envelope I'd prepared earlier with some carefully selected items, her phone's backup data, the photos I'd taken, and a letter. The letter was simple. I was ending things and she'd be leaving the house. I'd give her a deadline. She needed to understand that her actions had consequences, and I wasn't going to be the fool anymore. I wanted her to see that her betrayal had irreparably broken what we had. She begged, pleaded, cried, but I stayed silent. My stomach was in knots, but I knew I was making the right move. I didn't want to just throw her out. I wanted her to feel what it was like to be completely powerless. She was the one who crossed the line, so I'd make sure she paid in her own way. After she left, I sat in the quiet house, feeling a strange mix of relief and rage. The house was empty, the silence deafening. I had the proof, I had the plan, and I knew this was just the beginning. I wasn't just going to walk away from this. I was going to make her regret ever looking at Mark, ever betraying me. That night, as I stared at the empty doorway, I wondered how she'd react when she realized I'd sealed her fate. Honestly, I couldn't wait to see her face when she knew I'd turned her world upside down. This was about more than ending a marriage. It was about making her understand that she'd made a huge mistake crossing me. Next, I'll tell you what I did to follow through with the plan, how I set everything in motion, and what came after. Do you want me to keep going? The moment I handed her the envelope, I felt a strange, almost satisfying weight lift off my shoulders. She looked like she'd been hit by a freight train, her face ghostly, eyes glassy with shock and guilt. I saw her reach out, trembling, for the letter and the photos, as if trying to hold onto some semblance of control. But I didn't let her. I kept my voice steady, cold even. "You need to leave tonight," I told her. "Pack what you need and be gone. You crossed a line and I won't pretend it didn't happen. This is your choice, lose everything or start from scratch without me." She looked at me with those big, tear-streaked eyes, trembling as she whispered, "Please don't do this. We can fix it." "No," I cut her off sharply. "You had your chance. Now it's over." I watched her swallow hard, her shoulders slumping as if she finally understood that I was serious. I added, "You've got an hour. If you're not out by then, I'll change the locks myself." She left the house in a rush, tears streaming down her face, clutching the envelope like a lifeline. I stayed behind, feeling the adrenaline rush through my veins. I knew she'd try to call, to beg, but I was done playing nice. This was about sending a message. Over the next few days, I set my revenge plan into motion. I contacted her best friend, Lisa, to leak what I'd uncovered. I knew Lisa had always been close to Sarah, but I also knew she'd be shocked when she saw the evidence. I wasn't planning to give Sarah any mercy. I wanted her to feel the betrayal from everyone she cared about. I told Lisa I had photos, texts, and proof that Sarah had been unfaithful for months. I didn't ask for her permission. I just told her I was done. She was stunned but agreed to do her part. I sent her the photos, the messages, and asked her to confront Sarah with everything. I knew Lisa hated betrayal just as much as I did, and I wanted her to see that Sarah's little secret was about to be exposed to everyone. Meanwhile, I also put some of the evidence in a flash drive and hid it in a place I knew Sarah would look, her makeup bag. I wanted her to find it, to realize that her lies had been uncovered everywhere, even in her own hiding spots. I didn't want to give her the satisfaction of a clean break. I wanted her to see that her secrets couldn't stay buried. That night, I sent her an anonymous message, telling her I knew the truth. I made it clear I wasn't going to let her play victim anymore. I wanted her to realize that I'd already won, she just didn't know it yet. I needed her to feel the panic of being caught, the shame of her lies unraveling. Within hours, I started getting calls from mutual friends, acquaintances, even her family. They'd seen the photos online, read the messages. The fallout was immediate. I could hear the shock in their voices, the anger, the disappointment. I didn't give a damn. My focus was on her, knowing that she was losing everything piece by piece. Watching her world collapse was strangely satisfying. I'd never been one for revenge games, but I'd never felt this level of betrayal before. When she finally called me, crying, pleading to talk, I simply said, "It's over. You chose him, you chose to lie, so now you can deal with the consequences." I knew she'd try to reach out again, but I was done. I needed her to sit with her guilt. That's when I realized I didn't just want her out of my life. I wanted her to feel the pain of her own choices. I'd made sure everyone knew, and I'd made sure she'd never look at me the same way again. I was finally in control, and I knew I'd won the game of betrayal she played so recklessly. Next, I'll tell you about the fallout, the quiet, the anger, and how I finally decided to move on. Want me to keep going? The aftermath of what I did was like watching a slow train wreck, except I wasn't the one crashing. I stayed in my house, but the atmosphere was heavy with the weight of everything exposed. Friends, neighbors, even her family, all starting to turn their eyes toward her like she was some kind of mistake. I could see it in their expressions, the whispers. Behind their backs, that's what I wanted, for her to feel the shame, the isolation. I didn't bother reaching out to her after she left. Honestly, I didn't need to. The house was too quiet, every corner holding a reminder of what I'd lost, but also what I'd gained, clarity. I had all the proof I needed, and I wasn't about to let her come crawling back pretending it was just a mistake. No, I wanted her to understand that her betrayal went beyond our marriage. It was a complete betrayal of trust, and I wasn't going to be the fool anymore. A few days after she left, I finally sat down to reflect. I felt a strange mix of relief and emptiness. The rage that had fueled me was fading, replaced by a calm that was almost worse. I realized I'd been holding onto a version of us that no longer existed. That's when I understood. I had to move on, not just for myself, but for whatever dignity I had left. I took all the evidence I'd collected, photos, texts, the flash drive, and filed for divorce. I handed over the keys to the house, watching her face as I did. She looked defeated, hollowed out, knowing she'd lost everything because of her own choices. I told her I didn't want to hear from her again, and I meant it. In the days that followed, I disconnected from everyone who enabled her. Mutual friends who were shocked by the truth, acquaintances who had no idea what was going on behind the scenes. I started going to the gym more regularly, clearing my head, trying to focus on rebuilding my life. It wasn't easy. Trust had been broken in ways I never imagined. Still, I felt a strange sense of liberation. I was finally free of the chaos she dragged into my world. But the most surprising thing was how much lighter I felt. The anger, the betrayal, they still stung, but I decided I wasn't going to let her control me anymore. I made a clear choice, to leave that toxic chapter behind and focus on myself. I knew now that I deserved better, that I deserved honesty and respect, not lies and secrets. One night, I sat in my living room with a glass of whiskey, staring at the empty space where she used to sit. I realized I'd done everything I could to reclaim my dignity. I'd exposed her, pushed her out, and now I had to live with the consequences. But I also knew I'd never let her do this to me again. Looking back, I'm not proud of the revenge I pulled off, but I am proud that I took control. No one should tolerate betrayal and lies, especially from someone they trust. I learned that sometimes you have to take matters into your own hands and show that betrayal has a price. Because if you don't, you'll just keep living in the shadow of what used to be. Next, I'll tell you what I learned from all this, what I wish I'd known before, and what I'd tell others in a similar situation. Want me to continue? Sitting here now, reflecting on everything, I realize how much I underestimated the toll betrayal takes on you. At first, I was just numb, then furious, then cold. I thought I'd lost my sense of control, but somewhere along the way, I found it again. Harder, sharper, more ruthless than I thought I could be. One thing I wish I knew before all this started: trust isn't something you should give away blindly. Sure, I believed in her, believed in us, but I also ignored the little signs, missed the late nights, the sudden quietness when her phone lit up, the way she'd dodge questions. I stayed complacent because I wanted to believe the best. That's a mistake I won't make again. Trust has to be earned, and even then it's fragile. Once broken, it's nearly impossible to fix. Another thing I've learned: revenge isn't about destruction for its own sake. It's about reclaiming your dignity, making the other person see what they lost. I wanted her to feel the sting of losing everything she took for granted. That's why I played my hand carefully, every step calculated. If I had just stormed in and screamed, maybe I'd feel better short term, but I knew that wouldn't give me the closure I needed. Instead, I wanted her to remember what she threw away, permanently. I also realized that the worst part isn't even the betrayal itself. It's how it changes you afterward. I used to be someone who trusted easily, who believed in loyalty and honesty. Now I'm more guarded, more cautious. That's not a bad thing, but I see how easy it is to shut down, to become a shell of who you once were. That's the real danger, letting betrayal turn you into someone you don't recognize. So my advice: don't ignore the red flags. Don't dismiss your gut feelings because you want to believe in the best. Because when betrayal hits, it hits hard and it can change everything. But here's the truth I've come to accept: betrayal can teach you what you need to know about yourself. It's painful, but it's also a kind of brutal honesty. I learned I'm stronger than I thought, capable of standing tall even after the worst. That's a lesson I wouldn't take back, even if I could. Most importantly, I learned that you can't control other people's choices. You can only control yours. I chose to take action, to expose her lies, to cut her out of my life. I didn't let her define my future. And that, I think, is the biggest takeaway. When life throws betrayal your way, the power is still yours. How you respond, how you rebuild, how you refuse to let her win. If I could give one piece of advice to someone in a similar situation, it's this: trust yourself. First, your intuition is rarely wrong. When it whispers that something's off, listen. Because ignoring it only makes the fall harder. And when you're ready, take control. Don't wait for the apology or the explanation. Take what you need to move forward, however that looks. Betrayal is a shadow, sure, but it's also a mirror. It shows you what you're made of, whether you fold or fight. I chose to fight and I survived. That's what I'd tell anyone who's dealt with this kind of pain: you're stronger than your pain. You just have to believe it enough to do something about it. Next, I'll tell you what I finally did, how I took my power back with one concrete action that sealed my new beginning. Want me to go on? The day I finally took decisive action was the day everything changed for good. I woke up early, feeling both determined and exhausted. I had already gone through the worst of the fallout, the emotional chaos, the betrayal, the lies, and now I was ready to close that chapter. No more dragging around the weight of her betrayal. It was time to cut the cord clean. I got dressed, grabbed my car keys, and headed straight to the lawyer's office. I'd made up my mind I was filing for divorce. I brought all the evidence I'd accumulated over the past week: the photos, the texts, the emails, the recordings I'd secretly kept. I wanted to make it clear I wasn't just leaving. I was ending this with certainty, with purpose. Sitting in her office, I handed over the documents. The lawyer looked over everything carefully, then looked up with a small nod. "It's straightforward," he said. "No children involved, no complicated assets, just a clean break." I felt a strange sense of relief flood through me. This was the final step, the one that confirmed I was reclaiming my life. I looked at my watch and said, "Let's do it. I want her served today." I wanted her to see that I wasn't messing around anymore. This wasn't just about leaving her. It was about finally putting an end to the nightmare she dragged me into. I knew she'd try to contact me again, maybe plead, maybe beg, but I was done. I'd made my choice. Later that afternoon, I handed her the divorce papers myself. The moment I knocked on her door and saw her face crumple when she realized what I was holding, that was the last piece of her old life. She looked stunned, like she'd been hit by a truck. I didn't say much. I just handed her the documents, looked her in the eyes, and said, "It's over. You chose him, you chose your lies. Now you deal with it." She sank to her knees, tears streaming down her face, but I didn't feel any pity. I'd already given her enough chances, enough warnings. This was about making her understand that actions have consequences. She had shredded our life, and now she was paying the price. As I walked away from her apartment, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time: freedom. I was done with the pain, the suspicion, the heartbreak. I'd taken back control, and I'd done it on my own terms. The house I once shared with her was now just a memory, a reminder of what I'd lost, but also what I was finally leaving behind. That night I sat alone in my new place, the silence wrapping around me like a shield. I poured myself a drink and looked around at my empty apartment. It was quiet, peaceful even. No more lies, no more betrayal, just me, finally free. I realized that all the pain, all the anger had led me here to a moment of clarity. I learned that sometimes you have to rip everything apart to rebuild. That betrayal can be a turning point, not just an ending. I chose to take control of my story, to reclaim my dignity and move forward. Looking back, I know I'll never forget what happened. But I also know I'll never let anyone treat me like that again. Trust is earned, and betrayal is a lesson. The most important thing I learned is that you don't have to be a victim. You can choose how to respond. And that's exactly what I did. I took my keys, my dignity, and my future, and I walked away. Because sometimes the only way to truly reclaim yourself is to walk out that door and never look back.